So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you making time for this. We know you have a lot of other choices. This is an important project, though. We've been working on it for a long time. I've actually been involved in it since about 2010 or 11. I've kind of lost track. It has been so long, but we're excited now that we're to the point of building the portal for NCICU. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We hope that every campus has one or more representatives here, and look forward to having time today for discussion and questions that you may have. But first, I'm going to call on Vicki. Would you go through, Vicki, our Director of Information Technology, and go through some housekeeping items for us here?
Yeah, thank you, Hope. So I'll just make this real brief. So as Hope said, thanks for joining. We'd like this to be an interactive session. So we're going to break periodically for questions, but you can also add questions to the chat, or you could raise your hand. We do ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking, just that'll make it a more enjoyable experience for everyone. And then in the participant list, if you would rename yourself and add your campus to your name, that would help identification. And also there's the option to show captions. Sometimes we find that useful in large webinars to show the captions. Sorry about that. And then I'm going to upload the PowerPoint to the chat. It'll take about 4 or 5 minutes for that to upload, but there are just instructions here on the screen of how to download that PowerPoint if you would like during the session, but you don't need to. I will send you that PowerPoint after the session concludes. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Hope.
Thank you. If you'll move to the next slide, please. Great. So do you want to go ahead and do that, Vicki, or shall I?
I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. Go ahead, Hope.
Okay, fine. We have 1 hour allotted for this, and so we are going to be moving quite along, but we do want to make sure that we have time to answer questions and hear suggestions and things that you may have. So we're already almost to the point of talking about our project partners. We'll have some introductions. As Vicki mentioned, we're asking that you put your name on your square, because if we took the time to introduce everybody, we would have to extend this to about 1.5 hours. And we're going to try very hard to keep to our deadline of 1 hour that we promised to do. We will have some discussion about the project overview and benefits to give you more idea for what this is. Some of you have been involved in this a long time, and so you'll know, but others are newer to it. We also will hear from our project partners on the data portal and what it means, along with some mock-up. And these are not, for our IR people, do not start looking at the numbers. This is not actual number information. This is an example of some of the dashboards that you will be able to have from this, and a bit about the architecture of the portal. We do have some information on our estimated project timeline, and then some next steps and Q&A. So let's keep moving forward to stay on track. We're excited. When I mentioned that we've been involved in this project since about 2010 or 11, it has taken quite a while to get to this point of having our part of the portal built for our state's longitudinal data system. UNC system, community college system, Department of Public Instruction, and a number of pieces in the Department of Commerce are already in place. But the good thing about our getting funding now to do this, and we're delighted to have received this funding from the Office of State Budget and Management in the Governor's Office to develop this project. The great thing about it is we have terrific partners now, and I'm not sure we would have had them way back then. So we're delighted today. You'll hear more from Intervision, our great partners building the portal for us, and wanted to be sure that all of you know that this will be on the platform of Amazon Web Services. And we're excited about that because we know many of you use that already. So the Intervision team that you'll be hearing from in just a moment is terrific. And we really want to thank those of you on this Zoom and those not able to attend today who were advisors to us. One, to Vicki as she was drafting the RFP, And then as we received responses to the RFP. So we had several companies submit plans to us for how they would build the portal. And overwhelmingly, all of you helped us with the decision that it should be InterVision. So we're very pleased to be where we are right now. Okay, next one, Vicki. Just very quickly, I'll run through our folks here today from NCICU. I'm Hope Williams, and I did have my, I think I know most of you, but if not, it's good to see those of you for the first time. We're pleased to have Tom West, who's our Vice President for Government Relations and General Counsel here at NCICU. He and I'm on the Longitudinal Data System Board. He's on one of the steering committee pieces. We have others on our teams, Vicki Humphreys, who you've met already as a project manager for NCICU with us, as our Director of Information Technology, and she's on the information technology side of things. And of course, there are two major components in the longitudinal data system, one of which is the IT side, the other of which is the IR side. So we're thrilled to have Dr. Carrie Mata, who's our Director of Research and who's our subject matter expert. And I will say that we're so pleased to have both Vicki and Carrie, because Vicki had great experience when she was with the Department of Public Instruction with longitudinal data. And Carrie, when she was working only actually, now she works with multiple states, including us, but when she was in Georgia, she was actively involved in submitting data for Georgia's independent colleges and universities and their longitudinal data system. So I mentioned that just because it's really important to know that we've got folks with a lot of experience helping guide all of this. In addition to that, we're delighted to have Gwen Hobbs, my executive assistant and our office manager. And I mentioned that these are state funds. There is a lot of reporting, just as all of you know that there has been a lot of reporting with all the COVID funds and with any government funds that you receive. So she will be taking care of that for us. And then I don't want to be remiss. I want to give you time to think about this during the session today. And that is, Phil, we apologize, but we're holding you up as the gold star because Phil Handwork is the first person and he's from Wake Forest to agree and volunteer to be on our advisory committee. You'll hear more about the advisory committee as we go through this process, but it's extremely important. Just as we had advisory committee members helping us through the RFP development and the choice of our partner, we need an advisory committee to help guide this to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our sector. So let's see, I'm gonna go back to that. I think you switched, Vicki, but I need to go back to Bill to have him introduce our InterVision project team.
Thanks. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bill Bosworth. I'm the project manager from InterVision, and I will be the point person representing the resources that we have present, who I think she is on the call. She's our chief applications architect, but we also have a number of other people who will be working very closely with us throughout the project. And I won't go through everybody's name, but just please be aware that I will be the primary contact for this project, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Great, thank you, Bill. Okay, project overview. We could go on a lot longer than the time that we have to talk about this today, no question, but I do want to say several things as we get started. One is that there are different models in different states, and a number of states have one big warehouse where everybody sends data. And we've said from the beginning that we were not comfortable with that we as independent colleges and universities have all kinds of concerns about liability that the state with its sovereign immunity doesn't have. We did have a law passed by the North Carolina General Assembly to give us immunity for data we're submitting to the system. But we also wanted to make sure that we had control over the data and that you have control over what you agree to be a part of and not a part of. So this is a federated system. That's why we're going to have our portal where we'll have our data. And then as questions come up, we'll be checking with you and more about that later, about whether you want to be a part of that. And then we would submit the data. So I want you to be aware of that because some of you may have been in other states where there is one large warehouse. It will be, as I mentioned, built on Amazon Web Services, and the portal will meet, this is important too, North Carolina state security standard policies for non-state hosted solutions involving security, and that means that the campuses control who sees their data. So that's a really important part. All of the data requests for a longitudinal data system will go through an approval process, and data will not be shared unless your campus approves it. So we want you to know that you're going to be in complete control of the data. The other great part for those of you who are already submitting data that we've been collecting for years and years in the aggregate form, the great thing is that you will not have, and I know Carrie is clapping now probably, even if she is muted, you will not be submitting spreadsheets with all of that aggregate data on them, because we'll be able to get that from our student unit record data submissions. Just very briefly, we wanted you to understand why they're saying in North Carolina that we need a longitudinal data system. And if you look at this project overview, you'll see the questions. In K-12, when they look at, for example, how many students are graduating from low-performing high schools, they can answer that question because they have that K-12 longitudinal system. However, when policymakers are trying to figure out where they need to spend their resources, it really stops there for K-12. What they want to know, and they've been asking us, and we don't have data to tell them, although the other public sectors do, is what happens to those students once they graduate? Do they go to higher education? Do they graduate from college? Do they get a job in North Carolina? And all of the information that really needs to be cross-sector data. So you can see some of the questions down here. And I won't go through all of those, but that's the idea, is that we need to be able to see what happens to students as they cross. And of course, many of our presidents and others at our institutions are being asked daily by potential students and their parents about, well, what can I expect to make if I major in such and such? And once we connect the longitudinal data system with the Department of Commerce data, we'll be able to answer that. UNC and community colleges already provide that data and connection, and so they have that data, which we do not have at this time. Okay, Vicki, next one. And you'll see that we're talking about this in kind of 3 different columns here. One is we need to continue to collect our aggregate data. There's a lot of information we provide only in aggregate form. So we want to take that from the student unit record level data, so you don't have to, as our IR directors and registrars and many others who submit data to us, that you don't have to spend the time to do all of that. The new part of this will be the student unit record data, but that's the only way that we can then find what happens to a student as that student moves across from K-12 to higher ed and into the workforce. And then the historical data, which we hope will be helpful to you and will be built and added, which will give you that historical perspective as well. And that will be a part of this portal too. The integrations, you'll hear more about this in just a minute, but eScholar is the matching software that will be used, the matching system. They have, you'll see the trademark there, the eScholar unique ID. And just to remind you, this entire system is based on the unique ID that students are given in pre-K in some cases, and certainly K-12. There will be some matching, obviously, for students who then come to us and at a later time, but that matching process is that eScholar unique ID. There is part of the overall longitudinal data system, and then NC Schoolworks, which you will hear, so don't get confused by all the jargon, is really the very much the educational part of that. We also want to have, and you'll see some examples of these in just a few minutes, and dynamic dashboards, which we hope will be helpful to you. They certainly will be to us, as we're asked by the legislature and Congress to provide information about what's going on among our colleges and how everything is fitting together. Also dynamic reports that now sometimes are not even possible to put together with the limited data that we have. And then there will be some standard reports, much of which will involve the aggregate data piece. And already we're doing a lot of those on enrollment and financial aid and other kinds of reports that are kind of standard reports already. Okay, Vicki, I think we're ready to move here. Just very briefly, I'm not going to read all of this either, but it is, we hope, going to reduce the requests in terms of data that we're having to request from you. We certainly want to note that policymakers have mandated the system. They have encouraged us to be a part of that. And some of you from other states may know that the sectors in some other states, the independent sectors, are required to submit data. There have been a couple of recommendations about requiring it for us. We've tried to explain that we're great partners with the state and that we'll work and do this without that requirement. So right now, at least, it is a voluntary type of information in terms of being able to submit the data and agreeing to do that. There will be some auto-generated reminders. Right now, I know that you get lots of emails from Carrie, and she probably would love this more than anyone about not having to do those, right? In terms of accessibility of data that you may not have now, and combining across campuses and sectors in whatever way we decide to do that, some standardized reporting, the tie-in through the Launchable Data System and SchoolWorks, and then the integration to eScholar, which does provide that unique ID for student matching. And then there's automated tracking and status. So for example, if we get a request and we send something out to you and ask if you agree to do that and be a part of it, there's an automated way to do that. So I'm going to stop there. I know that's a lot of information. A lot of this some of you have heard before, because this has been our goal to have it develop this way. But some of this may be new for you, and be happy to answer questions at that time when we do that. I think at this point, we're going to move from the benefits to the data portal and what it means. So Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point.
Great. Thank you, Hope. And good afternoon, everybody. What you see on the side right now is an overview of the process for the back end and the process focus for data portal. And as this translates to a technical delivery, it's really broken down into 3 phases. The first one is centered on data collection and aggregation of that data to include aggregated student and student level data. The second phase is the integration of that data into a common warehouse that allows for the data to be integrated across NCLDS, SchoolWorks, and eScholar. The important aspect of, I think, one of the biggest benefits from the project. And the third phase is the most tangible outcome for the project. It's really standard reporting and dashboards that users will be able to access to make data-driven decisions, but also be able to review the current status of data within their respective institutions. The thing to note here is that it is a standard process that we're following to build out a data and reporting solution. Aggregation, automation of the collection of data into a common standardized data warehouse using third native form, being able to monitor and measure the accuracy and integrity of data, and then providing that data in an environment, in a medium that's accessible and reliable and repeatable across multiple different levels of users. The one thing I will note around the reporting aspect, we will make available for those power users and more advanced in the use of data to have access directly to the data warehouse for those that don't actually want to use the standardized reporting. But by no means is that a requirement. Standardized reporting and dashboarding will be made available for all participating institutions. Next slide, please. So we have mocked up some demos and proof of concepts around the capabilities of the dashboarding. As Hope detailed earlier, these are made from artificial data. These are not actual or representative to what the current situation is around any of the numbers you're going to see. So please take it all with a grain of salt. The intent here for this first dashboard is to show the breakdown of financial aid and its distribution by type. The intent here is to give the user an idea of how funding is sourced from financial aid. This will also be available to be filtered by institution, and as we have historical data made available, the ability to look back historically over time, how that distribution of financial aid is made and distributed across institutions. Next slide, please. This is again, a mock-up of the types of federal assistance from grants, Pell, plus Stafford, work study and FSEOG, the proportion of that federal assistance as it's broken across the type of grant. Just a different way to slice the data. Next slide, please. This is a view of Pell Grant distribution by institution and comparing it year over year. This is not set in stone, but it's just another way to be able to show how the data can be represented. Again, this will also have a time element, so you as a user can look back historically to see how certain types of grants or financial assistance was being provided across multiple institutions. Next slide, please. This is a representation. Again, numbers are not accurate, they're artificial, but to be able to show the distribution of high school graduates from private and public institutions across the state, both geographically filterable by county, as well as the institution that those graduates go to within North Carolina. And this is a representation of the breakdown of undergraduate students that have enrolled for a specific period of time. Here it's centered on 2022, with the number of out-of-state versus in-state enrollments by institution. Just another way to be able to show and display the data. The last one is a view of undergrad students filterable by institution and where their home county is or their location. So to give users the idea of where the majority of the students are being sourced from internally in North Carolina. And next slide, please. This is a high-level view of the architecture for the data portal itself. So if you think back previously to the three phases of data ingestion, warehousing, and then business intelligence, that will all be done through the construct of AWS applications and services with connection to or integration to eScholar, Schoolworks, as well as NCLDS. But the intent here is to show the types of services and applications that we'll be consuming from AWS to help build out the data platform. Cognito is a part of the security and identity management. Redshift will be the primary data store. QuickSight will be one of the offerings we'll have made available for business intelligence consumption. We can also look at other sources such as Power BI or Tableau for those institutions that have access to those licenses already. But that is all I have for this slide. I'll hand it back over to you, Hope or Vicky, if there's no questions.
Hope, I thought we would stop here for questions if there were any in the chat.
We do have one in the chat, Vicky.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay. Oh, well, I do want to mention Phil is inviting everybody to join him on the advisory committee, and he's promised, this is a Wake Forest one, not from NCICU, a secret decoder ring and everything. So I know that will encourage all of you to join. On to Rusty's question. How is the data transferred? How will the PII data be secured? Who will have access to the portal? And would any of the data be shared with vendors or other outside entities? And I can answer a couple of those, and we'll do that first, and then Bill, turn it back to you. And Vicky, anything you would want to say involved in this, but these data are not going to be shared with any vendor or anyone else other than the questions that are being answered, other than the aggregate pieces that we use for standard reporting already. So that would not be identifiable. And any data research questions would come back to the campus before we would send it anywhere. And these researchers will have to go through a process with the state, which includes all of us, UNC, community colleges, K-12, us, pre-K, before anyone will even agree to answer the questions. And there may be questions the other sectors agree to answer that we don't. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And we are very cognizant of the security issues involved with not just breaches, but private student privacy and that kind of thing. So Vicky, Bill, do you want to address the data transfer and PII?
Sure. Thanks, Hope. The primary mechanism for delivery of data between institutions and the data portal will be built around a common encrypted data pipeline that will be connected from the data portal on AWS directly back to the institution. Dependent on institutions' individual capabilities, we will also look at other ways to deliver data that's encrypted through an upload source, if you can think of like an SFTP site, to allow users to log in to a secure environment with encrypted data to drop files off. That'll be a manual process. And then the third option that we're considering is API integration directly from the services within AWS on the data platform directly back to the home institution's systems if that's allowable. But the preferred method will be an encrypted data pipeline.
Vicky, did you want to respond to that? I will say in terms of who will have access to the portal, that it will be NCICU directly to the portal, will be NCICU and only a few of us here. And each institution will decide who on its campus will have access. Vicky, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, it will be role-based security, so the campuses will determine who's going to see their data. I mean, that's really the endpoint to that. And their data will not be shared with anyone really without the campus's approval. So any requests that come in from the NCLDS, those will go to any of the campuses in which data was requested. And if they, do not approve, then the data will not be shared.
And we are hoping that in most cases that will not be a question, but we think, and we've said from the beginning, which is differentiates us from our other sectors, that we need to have control over that. So absolutely, you will be asked before data is submitted. Any other question? The PII data secured. Was there anything else to add to that, Vicky?
I don't have anything else to
Okay, I
add.
think
What
if
Bill
there's
gave.
still more questions about that, we can come back to that for sure. How do we request access to the data for new IR employees? And will NCICU handle that, or will admins at the campus handle that? And Vicky, we've talked about this some in terms of the campus certainly has the control over who that will be. I'm not quite sure whether we've gotten to the point of how they get that control through us and the portal.
Well, the advisory committee will be very important in answering some of these questions. So a lot of this has not been decided yet. That's why we would like the advisory committee. We want your input. But the initial thought would be that each campus would have their own administrator, and they would be able to add and remove the campus employees that they would like to see, that they would like to see their data. So it should be controlled by the campuses.
Okay, Daryl says he's got it. Okay, all right. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. Giving it a minute to see if anyone is. Seeing none, we'll move on, I think, Vicky, to the estimated project timeline.
Yeah, so this is an estimated project timeline. We're going to try to stick to this as best as we can. You can see now in 2024 Q2, we're working on the project plan and the architecture and design. And then after that, we will have the advisory committee. Hopefully lots of you will be joining that. And then that's when we're going to really start determining exactly the details of this project and how it's going to work and flow. And then in Q1, January, February, and March, we hope to have the aggregate data collection and the eScholar integration and the record level data collection. And then once again, the advisory committee will then be assisting in how and what they want to see with the standard reports and importing of the historical data, Schoolworks integration, and NCLDS. The state security compliance, we're just kind of guessing when that will hit. That's kind of a hit or miss, working with the state. They have their own timeline. But we've added that there. And then Q3 for the dynamic dashboards and then the system training. And once again, it'll be really important for the advisory committee to help assist in determining what dashboards, is needed for this portal. So any questions on this?
I will add that the funding for this project disappears at the end of 26. And so we are working very hard. We have given ourselves a little extra time and to get it moving forward. But as you'll see, we talk about through at this point, Q3 of 2025. But there is additional time built in, and we want to be able to get it moving forward and make sure we've resolved any issues before the funding deadline is over. So just know that we do have a little extra time there. Okay. All right, our next steps, if you want your secret decoder ring, you're going to need to volunteer for the advisory committee. And Phil, I think we're in trouble now because I think we may actually have to have one, but please do volunteer, if you will. We would like to include as many people as possible. We know you have a million other things on your plate, but the last thing we want is to get to the end of this development process and have questions raised about, well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do it that way? And I wish I'd known kinds of questions. We want everybody to have as much information as you would like to have and as much involvement as you would like to have. So if you or someone on your campus, it can be one person on a campus. If you really are excited about this, you could have two. So whatever you'd like to do, we're happy to build it the way that you want it to be, because we actually want to build the portal the way that it needs to be to meet the needs of our individual campuses. And as we say all the time, we're called independent for a reason. And that means that everybody has different needs, and we have to figure out how to meet those in the one portal. Data sharing agreements. Some of you may have been around when we did the initial data sharing agreements back when we had a federal grant back in about 2012 to 17. And we will be coming back to those campuses with a new agreement because obviously those are very out of date and we didn't actually have an active portal at that time. But we will also be bringing those to campuses that had not signed them. We finally stopped when the system ran into some barriers at that time that were not our barriers, but other parts of the system barriers. So we stopped soliciting those. And so we will be coming back to every campus. So if you happen to remember that you had signed one, there will be an opportunity to review and sign another one. We will not be holding anyone to those that were signed back then. We also, earlier in the project, had designated, our IR folks had met multiple times and had designated about 38 data elements that they wanted to be collected. And we'll be revisiting that list too, because that was a long time back. One of the things we've said from the beginning is that we hope that that we can provide information similar to what you submit for iPads, right? That's the kind of data that we're interested in. And there will certainly be other things that we may want to add along the way. And there may be things that you want to add to the 38 or take out of the 38 that were decided a number of years ago. So we'll be revisiting all of that as well. And then we'll have the advisory committee that will meet. And this will especially be important because there are milestones in this project, which we have agreed with Intervision that they need to meet and that we need to agree to their having met. And that is where our advisory committee, in addition to individual things that may come up along the way, but that's where the advisory committee is really going to be critical, because we want to make sure, again, that this is the portal. It's our NCICU portal, so we want to make sure that it is yours. And I'll just remind you that NCICU is comprised by all of our campuses, so we want to make sure that this represents everyone's interests and concerns. Okay, I think we are now on, aren't we, Vicki, to questions and answers? Okay, first of all, if you have specific questions. Gwen is going to be handling the reporting and all of that from NCICU. So I don't think you'll be having questions for Gwen, lucky Gwen, on the reporting on the financials, but Tom and Vicky and Carrie and I certainly, for any questions related overall or to IT or IR issues, certainly we're available. But right now we want to open this up to questions that you may have here. And we know we've run through this quickly, but I don't know that we could have gotten you for any longer. And we appreciate you making time for this hour that we have. And if you don't have any, we'll give you time back. But we want to make sure that you have time while we're all gathered here today to be able to ask any questions that you may think are important to ask. And Carrie, also, I see you on. If you have a comment, certainly feel free. Okay. We do have a question from Marin. Let's see. Oh, how or where do you volunteer? And I think, Rebecca, you put that, I think, in the chat right there. And there you go there. And then the question is, can someone address the Power BI or Tableau reporting? Bill, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, Hope. So Power BI and Tableau are two of the different platforms that we're looking at for access to the dashboards. The third one would be native to AWS, which is QuickSight. But as far as landing on a single business intelligence tool to be used, we haven't fully decided yet. But we'll have the flexibility to go in either direction of Tableau and or Power BI, as well as QuickSight.
And one of the reasons I'm imagine that Marin's asking this question is it's come up before about campuses and licenses and cost and all of that. So I would think, I don't know, Vicky, if you have anything you want to add, but I would think that this would be another important topic that the advisory committee is going to need to address.
Yeah, I think this will be an important topic for the advisory committee. And Bill, can you maybe address the licenses for the BI tools?
Sure. So for institutions that already have the licensing, there wouldn't be any additional burden or cost associated to it. One thing to consider is that university or institutions that have existing Office 365 licenses, for example, there's a good possibility that the majority of faculty and staff will already be licensed with Power BI. That's just one consideration that may help with some of the cost efforts.
Okay, are there other questions? I do want to say that I hope that you understand. Okay, Marin's got another question, I think. Oh, no, Marin's got a thumbs up. Yay, thank you, Marin. Thank you for the thumbs up. But I do want to say that the reason we were trying to get someone from every campus on here, I hope you understand, because it's complicated, but it also is going to be moving forward in a fairly incremental, but moving timeline. So we really want to be sure that campuses understand what is happening and that they are participating in it to the degree that they are able and wish to do so. So this is certainly not any kind of requirement or anything. We don't do that, I hope you know. We advocate for, we don't require. But at the same time, we want to be sure that this meets our campus's needs. So we don't want to get to the end of this and have people say, oh, no, why'd you do it that way? So if you think you might have a question about that at the end, please be involved from the beginning, and we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen. Could you provide a sense of the time commitment to be a part of the advisory committee? And Vicky, we've talked about this some, but it's not as significant. I guess that may vary by individual definitions. But since it will be looking primarily at milestones, I don't really have an hour type of estimate. Do you, Vicky?
No, I don't really have an hour type of estimate, but what I can say is that I'm hoping that we have enough volunteers to where if your schedule doesn't allow at that time to participate in that particular decision, that you could join, and out of maybe 10 decisions, you'd be able to participate in 9 of them. Yeah. So I mean, what's going to happen is that once we get the advisory committee, then we're going to meet as a group, go over the first deliverable and try to make decisions to try to get that one moving. And then Intervision will have time then to do their development. And in the meantime, we'll be working on, just kind of discussing how we want the next deliverable to be developed. So, I mean, part of it, we're going to need to keep it moving so that we get the timeline. And I can't really say exactly how many hours that will be, but we're going to try to keep that to a minimum.
Right, and as Vicky said, one of the things that would be so helpful in this process is if we can get enough there so that the size and type of institution, that you're not the only one from that, because we do have different sizes and types and all that kinds of thing of institutions, so that others might be on there if you have to be missing one. This is not required for to be at every single one, although we certainly hope you will as much as possible. And the question to answer both Susan and Carol's questions, we certainly at this point plan for these meetings to be virtual, because we know that it's impossible to bring everybody in. And we know one of the only things maybe from COVID is that we know we can do virtual meetings quite well and get a lot of business done. So and plus our folks here with Intervision are spread all over the country too. So we don't want to bring them in from all different places either, but we think we can do this virtually, which will take a lot less time. Will there be time built in for users to review data for accuracy before the dashboards go live? And then will historic data from previous NCHED submissions be presented? So in terms of the time built in for users to review the data for accuracy before the dashboards go live, we certainly would want you to see those, because we're going to need to make sure, at least in the beginning, that we've got the things set up right to gather the data correctly to do the dashboards that we're going to be doing. So there's going to be a lot of review. We're not interested in presenting things that either you haven't seen at all or that you haven't seen how it's going to come out, right? And then the historic data from NCHEDs, that's the part that on the kind of columns we would like to go back and have some historical data for your purposes and ours, because we will want to have, just as some of the mock dashboards showed longitudinal data for NCICU, then we would like to be able to have that and know that that's of interest to you as well. And I think we were talking about going back, maybe, was it 5 years, 6 years, Vicki? How far back?
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the statement of work said 10 years for aggregate and 5 years for student record level.
Right, 5 years, 10 years. And obviously that depends on the institution, because it's going to be up to you to what you and your student information systems can do and what you'd like to get out of them. But we wanted to make sure, for those of you who really do want to use this in a longitudinal way for your own campus data, that you have that opportunity.
And I also want to just add that data requests that come from the state longitudinal data system, not only will you go through the process of approving that, but if you do approve it, then you'll have a chance to view that data before it is sent back to the requester.
Right, and we really don't know what to expect in terms of requests. We've heard that there may be a lot. I was talking to my colleague in Wisconsin a few months ago, and they started theirs a long time ago. And I said, well, how many requests a month do you get? And he said, 0. I said, well, how many have you had this year? And he said, 0. I don't think it's going to be like that in North Carolina. We have a lot of people who would like to have a lot of data. But as I said, first of all, to get even to us, it's going to have to go through the different sectors thinking that it's an appropriate question for the system. It's not that anybody can ask anything they want. Well, they can ask anything they want to, but it won't get through the system, right? And then when it comes to us, we as a sector can say no. If we feel like, if we were to feel, and we hope this is not the case, that somebody's really out to get us for some reason or has some hidden agenda, or maybe not so hidden agenda, that isn't really appropriate, then we will have the opportunity to say we're not doing that one. And individual institutions would have the same thing. Obviously, it won't be as valuable if we have campuses that don't participate in certain things, because the picture that it presents of our sector will not be complete in any way, but this is your data, and so these are your data, and we want you to know that we recognize that, and that's what we say to others. Just so you're aware, the UNC system, community college system, and DPI for K-12 all have student unit record data in their offices. We don't have that. We've not suggested that. We wanted our federated portal for a reason that we would have our sector to have that, but that's really under your control. Any other questions?
Not seeing any.
I think I heard something. No,
I don't see any other questions in the chat.
I don't see him in the chat and I don't see a hand raised, but I thought I heard someone's voice. So, okay, we're gonna give you some time back. I know this is a lot to take in. Some of you probably thought, oh yeah, I knew all that already, who've been around for a while. And others may be saying, what in the world is this? So as you decide on questions that you have and would like to talk with us, please feel free to talk with me, to talk with Tom, Vicky, and or Carrie. Okay, we've got a question from Rebecca, and then also Ken Davis just sent in a question. Was that what you were going to let me know about, Rebecca?
Yes, I was going to read Ken's question, but you've already got it, so please.
Okay, great. Ken is saying, when will we start developing for the data aggregation part of the project due in Q1 2025? The sooner we get the field names over which we will be aggregating, the better.
Yeah, so I think on one of those slides, I hope you had that where you were going to give until the 30th of April for those to sign up for the advisory committee. And then shortly after that, I think that we should get started. As Ken said, the sooner the better to start going over the field names for the, well, actually for the record level. For the aggregate, we already know what we're collecting for the aggregate, which is what you already submit for in spreadsheets to carry.
Right, but we'll be taking now that aggregate, we'll be taking from the student unit record level, which will keep you from having to submit all of that, right? So we're hopeful that we can take some of that burden off and okay, there we go. Yes, and so, but part of this, if we can get, and then we've got 2 weeks, today's the 15th, need it by the 30th. For those of you who will agree to contact Vicky, and that's in the chat too, about how to do that. And most of you know that anyway, to let us know if you'll do that. And the sooner we can get moving on this, the faster we'll move, right? Right, Bill?
That's correct, Hope.
Okay.
Just one clarification, Hope. We still will need to collect the aggregate data as we collect yearly, as Carrie collects. We won't be able to get that aggregate data from the student record level unless all 36 participants,
Yes, I know.
participate. Okay.
But if all do, we'll do it that way. And if not, we'll do it the other way, right? And as I said, right now we have the option of voluntarily doing this. And so we hope that everybody who feels that they can will agree to participate. As I also said, we've had a couple of times when members of the legislature said, well, we'll just require it. If you're going to get the need-based scholarship, or if you're going to fill in the blank from the state, then you'll have to do this. We certainly hope, and we've realized that we'll be bringing on campuses in stages. So we don't expect everybody to come in at one time. But we'll be working with you on that, and certainly hope we can have everybody. And if not, we'll be collecting some information different ways. But that's, again, the data are your data and you're in control. Any final thoughts from any of our NCICU team or Intervision, Bill?
We're looking forward and being excited and starting the project, Hope.
Great, thank you. And thanks to all the Intervision team who is on. And thanks to our NCICU folks, and Rebecca Leggett, our Director of Programs, and my special assistant has been helping us today with all the things going on with our Zoom meeting. We appreciate her help as well. And if there is anything else that you need, please let us know. Carrie, you have been the quiet one in this, who's been but you will be so involved. I think at least you need to say hello for our IR people.
Hello, IR people. No, I'm looking forward to it. I think this is going to be a great project, and it'll help campuses in submitting their data, because I know it gets really frustrating doing the NCICU spreadsheets over and over. I think that the best part is we'll be able to check data and have some checks and balances in place that allow institutions to see if data doesn't look correct on the entry, as opposed to after the reports are done.
Right, thank you. And I also want to mention Colleen Kinzer and Lexi Daniels, the director of our Independent College Fund, and the assistant director who are on. They do our fundraising side on projects and grants. and scholarships especially. But this is certainly one of our grants that we're very pleased to have, because we have been asked questions before about why can't your colleges fund this? To which I've kept answering, because we're doing this for the state, so shouldn't the state fund this? And they have, and we're delighted. Any other questions? I don't think we have any other NCICU staff that I've left out. I'm not seeing anyone unless they're on another page. So we'll give you that time back, and thank you so much. Please let us know about any questions you've had, and thanks so much, Intervision.
Yeah,
Take
thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.